Italy. 1633. An old man stands before a tribunal in Rome. He is nearly 70. His eyesight is failing. He has spent the better part of 2 decades building what he believed was the most complete picture of the heavens that any human being had ever assembled. And now, he is being asked to unsay all of it. His name, of course, is Galileo Galilei. But before we get to the trial, before the politics, before the church, before the verdict, we need to go back a little further. Because the real story starts not in a courtroom. It starts with a telescope pointed at the sky. When Galileo first turned his instrument toward the moon, he did not see what everyone expected. He did not see a perfect sphere, smooth and luminous, untouched by imperfection. He saw mountains. He saw valleys and shadows. He saw a surface that looked, strikingly, like Earth. This was not a small observation. This was not a footnote. For the better part of 2,000 years, the heavens had been understood as a realm of perfect, unchanging form, fundamentally different in kind from the messy, corruptible world below the moon. Aristotle had said so, and Aristotle, filtered through centuries of commentary and synthesis, had become something close to institutional bedrock. Then Galileo looked up and saw geology. He kept going. He turned the telescope toward Jupiter and found 4 small lights moving around it in regular, predictable loops. Moons, orbiting another planet. Not everything in the heavens revolved around Earth. He turned it toward Venus and found phases, the same waxing and waning we see in our own moon, which made sense only if Venus was orbiting the Sun. He published his findings. He corresponded with other astronomers. He wrote a book, The Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, in which 2 characters debated the old Aristotelian model and the new Copernican one. The book did not hide which side Galileo was on. Rome took notice. In 1633, he was summoned, tried, and condemned. He recanted, at least formally. He spent the rest of his life under house arrest. Now, here is the question that actually interests me. Not who was right. We know who was right. The real question is, how could brilliant, learned, careful people look at the same sky, the same observable universe, and reach such fundamentally different conclusions? How is that possible? Because it is too easy to look back at the Aristotelians and see only stubbornness or dogma or fear. That explanation is too cheap. These were not stupid people. They were often extraordinarily sophisticated thinkers, trained in logic and mathematics, deeply familiar with astronomical observation. So what was actually happening? Let me offer a way of thinking about this that I find genuinely useful. When 2 scientific traditions clash, when one framework replaces another, we tend to describe the conflict in terms of beliefs. One side believed X, the other believed Y. But I think that framing misses something important. What was really competing in the trial of Galileo was not just a set of beliefs. It was two different kinds of cognitive infrastructure, two different sets of, and I'll use this word deliberately, muscles, intellectual muscles. Galileo did not defeat Aristotle by finding a single logical flaw. He built something. He assembled, piece by piece, a different musculature for thinking about the physical world. Mathematics moved to the center of physics in a way it had never been before. Not mathematics as a descriptive tool. Aristotelians use mathematics too, but mathematics as the explanatory medium itself. The idea, which Galileo stated explicitly, that the book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. The experimental method became a way of generating evidence that could constrain theory in a new and more demanding way. Not just observation. Observation had always been part of natural philosophy, but controlled observation, designed to isolate variables, designed to produce results that could be reproduced and measured. Optical instruments entered the picture as legitimate extensions of human perception, a genuinely contested point, by the way. There were serious, non-stupid arguments that telescopes might distort rather than reveal. And crucially, the new framework absorbed large parts of the old one. Now, here is something I want you to notice about this process. The new framework, the one that emerged after Galileo and after Newton and after the consolidation of what we now call classical mechanics, could do something the old framework could not. It could explain why the old framework had seemed to work. The Aristotelian observation that heavy objects fall faster than light ones, true in many ordinary cases because of air resistance. The general intuition that things in motion tend to slow down, true in the world we actually live in because of friction. The old musculature was not simply wrong. It was a cruder approximation of something more precise. And the new musculature could generate the old observations as special cases, as limiting conditions, as first-order approximations in domains where certain complications could be ignored. This is important, and I want to be careful here because this is precisely the point where some people hear something I am not saying. I am not saying both frameworks were equally valid. I am saying something almost opposite. The reason we know the new framework is better is precisely because it can absorb the achievements of the old one, explain its partial successes, account for where it went right and where it broke down, and then go further. That asymmetry is objective. It is not a matter of preference or perspective. One musculature could do more work, integrate more evidence, generate more precise predictions, and unify more domains than the other. And this entanglement did not go unnoticed, because while Galileo was reorganizing the muscles of physics, something else was happening in parallel. Certain philosophers, and what we would now call psychologists, looked at the wreckage of the old Aristotelian system and asked a different question entirely. Not, what is the correct model of the heavens, but what kind of mind is capable of doing what Galileo just did? If the old dialectical method, the careful weighing of authoritative opinions, the classification of qualities, the endless commentary on commentary had failed, then maybe the problem was never just the content of the beliefs. Maybe the problem was the cognitive machinery being used to generate them. Descartes was the first major move. His proposal was radical in its simplicity. Put everything you think you know into parentheses. Suspend it. Not because it's wrong, but because you want to find what's left when you strip away everything that could possibly be doubted. What he found, or believed he found, was a rational engine that, when running without the noise of inherited opinion, could produce truths with the same kind of necessity that mathematics produces them. But here is where the story gets strange. Because the success of the Galilean revolution and the Newtonian revolution that followed produced a very particular dream, a dream that has never quite gone away. The dream goes like this. If the mathematical reorganization of physics was so powerful, if finding the right formal structure could unlock so much, then maybe there is a deeper layer still. A layer where all the remaining mystery dissolves, where everything follows from a small number of perfectly transparent principles. The dream, in other words, of finding the master muscle, the ultimate cognitive infrastructure from which everything else derives. You can trace this dream across centuries of intellectual history. Descartes thought he could rebuild all of human knowledge from a single indubitable starting point. Leibniz dreamed of a universal logical calculus, a formal language so precise that disputes could be resolved by calculation. And then, in the late 19th century, Gottlob Frege did something remarkable. He asked, what if we could reduce arithmetic itself, not just physics, but mathematics, to pure logic? What if the necessity we feel in mathematical truths turned out to be nothing more than the unfolding of logical laws? If that were true, it would mean we had found something extraordinary, a foundation beneath the foundation, a layer of cognitive infrastructure so deep and so transparent that everything above it, all of mathematics, and through mathematics, all of physics, and through physics, all of science, would be grounded in something that required no further grounding. The fio conductor, the guiding thread of knowledge, running from pure logic all the way up to the laws of motion. This project is not a marginal footnote in the history of ideas. It is arguably the central ambition of early 20th century philosophy of science. It animated Russell. It inspired the logical positivists. It shaped the way 3 generations of thinkers conceptualized what a scientific explanation is, what makes a claim meaningful, and what the relationship between mathematics and the world actually is. The dream was, find the master muscle. Find the one formal infrastructure that, once identified, makes every other piece of the puzzle fall into place. And the dream is seductive because it seems like a natural extension of exactly what Galileo had done. Galileo found the mathematical muscle beneath the qualitative muscle of Aristotelian physics. Newton found the gravitational muscle beneath the descriptive astronomy of Kepler. Why should the process not continue? Why should there not be, at the bottom, something like a logical bedrock? But notice what this dream requires. It requires that the process of inquiry converges. It requires, in other words, that there is a single center of gravity to the whole enterprise of knowledge, a place that fixes the productive workings of everything built on top of it, such that to revise it would not produce a local correction, a partial refutation, one belief traded for another. It would cascade. If that place were ever shown to be wrong, everything downstream of it would fall together, not piece by piece, all at once. A muscle so fundamental that every other muscle depends on it, and none of them depend back. Like we found the founding force of all possible cognitive activation. This would be a transcendental philosophy, more powerful than Kant could ever expect. The history of the 20th century is, in large part, the story of what happened when that dream ran into language and tried to find the mechanics of sense and science in some fine-grained inspection of syntax. It did not go well. My next video essays will show how the dream ended with Quine. For him, the history of knowledge looks less like a machine with a single master gear and more like an organism with many partially independent muscles, some growing, some atrophying, some being reorganized into configurations that can do work the old arrangements could not. There is no single lever that moves everything. There is no bedrock that requires no further bedrock. What there is, and this is not a small thing, is the ongoing asymmetric process by which some architectures absorb others, by which some musculatures grow rich enough to explain not just new phenomena, but also the partial success of their predecessors. That process is real. It is not arbitrary. It is not anything goes. It is just more distributed, more plural, and more dynamic than the dream of a master muscle allows. But if the 20th century taught us anything, it is that the search for foundations can take some unexpected turns. Sometimes it leads to revolutions in physics, sometimes it leads to revolutions in logic, and sometimes it leads to highly educated people spending decades investigating the legal status of a non-existent king of France, determining whether unicorns can participate in causal relations, or debating whether a mysterious object escaped reality or merely failed to satisfy an existential quantifier. As strange as these questions sound, they sit at the heart of one of the most influential intellectual traditions of the last 100 years. The jokes are funny because the problems are real. And many of the ideas behind this video about Galileo, conceptual architectures, logical analysis, scientific change, Frege, Russell, Carnap, Quine, Davidson, and the search for foundations are explored in much greater detail in my courses. If you're already watching this from inside one of those courses, then this video is simply the introduction. If not, you'll find links to the full courses on Patreon and Gumroad below. Either way, thank you for watching.